everybody. This is DearMamaSal on a wet, nasty looking morning. It is 4 degrees in Canada, and that would be 39 if you were in the States. I want to tell you, there are times when I wonder whether spending the time that I do on DearMamaSal is just what would the word be? Well, I guess I'd have to say I wonder whether it is something I just do for my own amusement or whether really it makes a difference. And then this weekend, as you know, some stuff happened and some emails came through that made me shake my head and go, okay, fine. It's worth every single minute that you spend. And then this morning, 2 more. So the first thing I need to do today is to give a shout out to Roseanne, wherever you are, Roseanne. I'm not sure what time you're listening to this one, but thank you. Because Roseanne has been on my butt for months for me to keep my commitment to do what I said I would do, which is this discussion on survivors of abuse. And I kept, I knew in my mind what I wanted to put together, and maybe one day I still will. But Roseanne kept dogging me and dogging me and dogging me and saying to me, why don't you just do it while you're driving? And I said, it's too big a subject. It's not the sort of subject you can just talk about on the way to work. And she said, yes it is, just do it over a whole series if necessary. But do it. So Roseanne, big virtual hug to you. You know, I read some of the stuff that you guys send to me and I am absolutely amazed. Amazed at your gratitude for what I do, and amazed at your honesty about your realities. And so I really wanted to thank all of you for making this such a meaningful project. I hate to say that it's a project, but I guess in a way it is. I mean, it always was, right? I remember Benji kept saying, I want to share you with the world. And that was his whole thing. It wasn't about, he wanted me to be a star, he wanted me to be, no. He just wanted to share me. And my strange way of looking at things. And I keep saying on all the different public pages, I'm not a therapist, nor do I pretend to be one. What I am is a human being that's suffered and survived. And I think that gives me more qualifications in some ways than a lot of people who've only read about it or studied it. I've actually suffered it and survived. And not only that, I think that I can actually see that, this sounds so strange, but I really can see that in some ways I became a better person because of it. Better than who? I don't know. But I can really see, as I sit here at 66, I can see that this was part of the bigger plan. Because I would not be able to talk about these things the way that I do if I had not been in it. So I want to sort of acknowledge an email that came to me this morning. And And it had to do with my part 1 of this series. And we're going to call this one part 3. The incredible thing was that somebody wrote to me and said they were listening to me, and it's a very regular viewer, said they were listening to it and they had to stop and rewind it because it was so meaningful to them that they started to cry. And of course, reading that from somebody that I've grown to love over the past months, that made me tear up as well, which is not good at this time of the morning. Nor is it easy to talk about at this time of the morning. So, but what I wanted to say was that what really moved me was the next question. Or the question that followed the statement about I had to stop because I needed to cry. Because it started to make sense and I needed to cry. You know, the fact that it's starting to make sense is probably the most huge compliment you can imagine. If what I am saying is starting to make some sense to some of you who have been victims of abuse, then I am deeply honored. Deeply honored. And it is a dream come true for me because that is exactly what I would wish, is that some of this started to make more sense. And the question that I got asked was, is it normal to be beaten? Is that what happens in normal families? Wow. I don't know about you guys, but that ripped at my soul. And the answer is absolutely not. It is not normal. In today's society, it is illegal. And nobody has the right to hit you. I don't care. I know that a lot of people are still getting beaten. I know in a lot of cultures it is still acceptable. But the majority of you who watch my vlogs come from North America. And let me be quite clear. It is not acceptable or lawful in North America. It is not acceptable or lawful. So I felt like answering that particular viewer with the question, which was, do you think it's normal to be sexually abused in your life? Because a lot of you could ask that question. And maybe not a lot, but I'm sure quite a few. And the answer would be no, of course not. But you know, when you grow up with abuse, whether it's physical, sexual, or the most incredibly dangerous one, mental abuse, that's where somebody's constantly putting you down, constantly berating you, constantly telling you you're useless, you're a piece of shit, excuse my language, you know, whatever it is that they're saying. You know, I think that's the most insidious, oh gosh, sorry. I've got to say insidious. Okay, that's the word I was trying to use, and Becca will be happy that I used it. It's the most, horrifying, horrible thing that anybody should do these things. But let's talk about why people do these things. And I was taught that, part of my healing was somebody teaching me, seek first to understand. Before you start doing anything, seek to understand. Why would anybody abuse a child? Well, first of all, because they probably saw it happen. In other words, you're probably aware of the fact that, I'm not sure what the statistics are, but monkey see, monkey do. If you were abused as a child, what are the chances of you being an abuser? High. Unless you are working on yourself, like listening to stuff like this and really reading about it and taking alternative actions, your chances of being an abuser are great. Because that is what you were taught. You were taught, this is how you act out your anger. This is how you act out your sexual fantasies. This is how you act out your frustration. Whatever it was that you experienced, this was somebody acting out their inadequacies. Because if they had good anger management, they wouldn't need to beat you. Make sense? If they actually were skilled at anger management, they would be able to communicate with you and not have to beat you because they lost control. If they were capable of understanding the boundary of what is acceptable and unacceptable in terms of sexual practices, they would never abuse a child. But somewhere they were never taught that boundary. Some were never taught that you don't hit women. And by the way, some women were not taught you don't hit men. Because let's be clear, there are an awful lot of angry women out there who can't control their anger as well. Maybe not as many as males hitting females, but it does go both ways. So, and then there is this other one that I talked about, which is, I don't feel powerful enough in myself, so what I will do is I will take power over you. And the way I will do that is I will humiliate you until I see you as a quivering wreck, and then I will be powerful. Of course, you will disgust me, but in that I am powerful. I had one woman who came to me for probably nearly a year, and I made it quite clear that I was not a therapist, but she apparently had struggled a great deal with therapists, and asked, she'd heard from somebody else, of what I do, and she asked if I could help her. And I asked her, what do you need help with? And she said, I am terrified. And I said, terrified of what? Terrified of my husband. And I said, okay, how does that manifest itself? What does that look like? Do you know that this woman spent a lot of her life hiding in a closet with a blankie over her, crying her heart out and terrified, like a little kid would. A traumatized little child. You know, it's very difficult when you hear that sort of story to actually not get angry. But you're probably wondering, well, why didn't she stand up to this guy? The same as I hear so often with people saying with battered women, well, why didn't they just get out? Well, the reason is because they don't have the self-esteem or the knowledge. Nobody's talking to them, you know, like we've been talking about these issues. Nobody's talking to them and explaining to them, this is not something you tolerate. This is not normal behavior. Abuse is not normal. So I'm now going to link the conversation we started all this with, which was about the inner child. So understand that grown woman crouching in her closet with a blanket over her had regressed back to a child. She had been verbally beaten to that point. Now, if you interviewed the husband, would he agree with that? Undoubtedly not. I was never that cruel. No, I love my wife. Or whatever. But her perception of what was happening was that cruel. And you know, it's our perception of things that qualifies our reaction to things. So if I've got low self-esteem and you give me a nasty look, how I interpret that will be totally different from a very healthy, self-confident person seeing the same look. See, a very healthy person seeing a strange look, you know, probably go, I just saw the look. Something wrong? You know, they act in an adult way. That's the question they ask. They check it out, seek first to understand. What was that look about? I saw the look. Even if the response is nothing, or you imagined that, or whatever. The main thing is you called it for what it was. And so you link these two issues. You see, the whole problem with life is that an awful lot of people are walking around and they have been in very abusive relationships, and therefore their emotional growth was stunted at some point. It was stopped. And they never actually emotionally grew as an adult, into adulthood. For some of them, their adult or their emotional age is still in their early teens or younger. Some are still acting like teenagers. And you probably know a few. And they're probably in their 40s, and they're still acting like teenagers half the time. I'm not saying don't have fun, but I'm going, understand the reaction here. So somebody who's in their 20s or late 20s, you know, and acting like a 15-year-old, you know, needs to get a serious wake-up call. And either needs therapy but somebody needs to love them enough to give them a wake-up call. Because they cannot survive in the real world if they believe that that's how you live. So somebody has to teach them what living is about. And most of us get to do it the hard way. Most of us get to leave home. I don't know about the rest of you, but I can remember leaving home, and I think I'd been gone less than a week when I wrote a letter to my stepfather. And the letter I wrote him was to thank him. You know, he never did adopt me as a child, so to speak, but he did look after me and my brother and sister for all our childhood years. He did give me a wonderful education, and would have given me an even better one if I'd been allowed to go to university. But he gave me a wonderful education, and he gave me all the trappings. You know, I got to do all the sports I wanted. I got to do all the theatre I wanted. You know, all those sort of things. There was never a no on that. I got to ride horses. I got to have my own horses. You know, it was just like, this man really looked after me as a child and gave me the best there was to give. And the joke was that I hardly knew him. We hardly ever spoke, because as children and stepchildren, we were told, you know, not to bother him. You know, our job was to be well behaved, the perfect children, so that he would not throw us out. That's a very difficult place to be for a child, because children are not perfect. So, for example, my stepbrother and stepsister could break things, and that was okay. That was being childish, childlike. But boy, if we dropped anything, well, that was major. And some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you who are in blended families probably relate to this as well. So that had to do with fear. That had to do with my mother's fear that if the children weren't well behaved, that she wouldn't be lovable anymore, or that we could be rejected as a family. I look at this whole problem about what is normal. Well, I'm going to say it again because I've said it before. I don't want to be normal. Never have wanted to be normal. I know because of my experiences, two things will be true. One is that I know that I do not see the world the same way as people who have not been through what I have been through. Because I do not trust the same way. Because people taught me not to trust them. I value friendships in a very different way. Because friendship to me is something you earn. Trust is something you earn. But on the other side, it also gives me great compassion. So any of you who are writing to me with these major issues, understand that part of your behavior today is due to whatever happened in your past. You remember what I said is you take this movement from normal development and you go up to a survivor development. And survivor is very different. Survivor has a whole different set of rules attached to it. And I will be talking to some of those as the weeks go on. But also, and I know this is difficult for some of you to hear, it brings with it a whole set of gifts. It is very true that most of us who have suffered great pain develop very real humor. It's the gift. I don't know why. Some of you will know that some of the greatest comedians are also extremely troubled, or have phobias, or have issues. But what they did is they took their pain and they turned it into humor. The yin and the yang. They took the negative and turned it into a positive. They took the lemon and made lemonade. And unless you get to know them well, or unless you get to hear the backstory, as they say, you would never know that this person has been through this sort of trauma in their lives. And that trauma can be absolutely anything. Don't assume that it's physical abuse or sexual abuse or mental abuse, because you really don't know. Because quite honestly, the reactions can be very, very similar. Very similar. So, again, my sincere thanks to Roseanne for pushing me to actually start this subject. There's part of me that is concerned that the subject is so serious and there is so much more to talk about. And I guess it just is what it is. I run a risk of turning some people off because of all the seriousness of this, but on the other hand, I know I run the risk of helping people too. And I think those of you who know me know that that's a no-brainer for me. So, on this dreary, very dreary Tuesday morning, I wish you a very pleasant morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, whenever you're listening to this. And thank you for the honor of viewing. I do consider it a great honor that you do that. I send you a virtual hug if you need it. Know that there are no coincidences in this world. If you're watching this stuff and starting to realize stuff that you didn't realize before, then there's a reason why we had to meet. And you are undoubtedly a very brave person, and more than likely a survivor. So smile, because this journey is ongoing. And smile because you've already made it this